Meow, 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 meow. I needed to get into something more comfortable. I think we're all new here, so let me give myself an introduction. Hi, I'm Shar, and I'm making a video, and you're watching it. Isn't that awesome? This is an examination into fashion. I really wanted to get at the idea of what fashion is. And fashion is disastrous. It has ruined our planet in more ways than one. Yes, physically, with, all the pollution that comes with creating synthetic fibers and fabrics, and also emotionally. We have an attachment to our clothes. We have an attachment to our things. But what happens when you speed up that cycle of loss? What happens when the trend cycle is going so fast that you can no longer keep up? This is a look into disastrous fashion. Before I started the second semester, I was kind of in a weird limbo period. I was really going through it. I think most of what I was going through was grief and loss. See, I go to school at Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana, 2,000-ish, give or take, miles away from my hometown, Pacific Palisades, California. Most of the time, when I used to have to explain where I was from, I would say I'm in between Santa Monica and Malibu, because nobody really hears about Pacific Palisades. But now I think everybody kind of knows what it is.
And this is going to be that Pacific Palisades neighborhood that we've been talking about all morning and basically since yesterday.
The latest numbers we're getting, and by the way, you're looking at live images of this massive mountainside as this fire still makes forward progress. The Pacific Palisades fire, as it stands, is at 2,900 acres as we speak.
In early January 2025, my house and most of my hometown burned down. I wasn't even there. I was here hanging out with some friends trying to play Mario Kart. We were all just kind of talking about playing video games, and I was trying really hard to stay calm. But I couldn't fathom the loss of everything. I couldn't fathom the absolute scale that this was happening on. I had never felt more distraught at losing things. That was one of the first things that my dad said to me when I called him about this, is that it's just things and we'll be able to replace it. And that's true. I've been able to buy a lot more clothes. He's been able to buy a new shoe rack. That's pretty nice. But it's stuff, but where's the attachment that I had? So, even though it's material, why am I so attached to my clothes? And much more importantly, why is my relationship with those clothes so tight? Now, in order to make this story, I couldn't just talk on my own. I also needed to interview a couple of my friends. You'll be hearing from two of them.
Amelie Chanfro.
And
Dasha Kotelenitz.
Amelie is a senior at Syracuse studying fashion. She also was in LA when the fires were happening.
I was in LA at the beginning. So what was that? That was like early January, right? My family's in Mar Vista, so luckily we were never threatened by it. Although I remember there was the last 2 days of being in LA where we had to go back inside because there was so much smoke. I was hanging out with some friends in like Sawtell, just getting lunch before I headed out, and we just had to go back because there was just so much smoke in the sky. You could smell it. It was everywhere.
So is my friend Dasha. She was working at our local yogurt shop and had to evacuate.
I was in town getting my money up, working that yogurt burned down. My house was fine. The burn the burn line ended up, I think at closest, like maybe a 1/10 of a mile away. Yeah, we got fortunate this time. The winds kind of calmed down, and then like it kind of also just like started running out of shit to burn. We did get evacuated for a few days. We were able to go back, but we didn't have power for like a week.
So hopefully they can shed some light onto these things in places that I wouldn't have thought of.
Ooh, okay.
If that fucked up my lipstick, then that's kind of funny, honestly. Okay. When we think about simplistic or minimalistic fashion, a lot of the time what we end up actually talking about is something along the lines of Coco Chanel. She very famously coined her phrase, wait, hold on. Let me actually, one of my personal fashion heroes is Iris Apfel. She's never once in her life compromised herself for the world. One of my favorite quotes of hers has always kind of been making fun of Coco Chanel. Iris said, Coco Chanel said, take one thing off. I always said, put another one on. Now, what exactly was Coco saying? She was saying, before you leave the house, look in the mirror and remove one accessory. Now, I kind of have a hard time taking Coco up on her word for this. She very famously married a Nazi officer and was not the most, let's say, progressive with her political ideologies. A lot of her thinking around fashion was very simplistic. She did coin the little black dress, which now pretty much every sorority girl on campus wears constantly. In a good way. It looks good. I like a simple dress. But personally, I'm not going to do anything simplistically. A lot of times when we talk about simplicity in fashion, we ended up talking about some kind of fascistic control. This is from an article on Antiques Roadshow. Strikingly beautiful, smart, and witty, Chanel spent her 20s, 30s, and 40s moving from beau to beau, living with wealthy men and high social circles who introduced her to the tastes and habits, as well as the who's who of the upper class. In 1923, Vera Bate, a British socialite and close friend of Coco's, introduced Chanel into the glittering social set that revolved around the English royals. Shortly after meeting, Chanel and the Duke of Westminster entered a 10-year-long relationship filled with passion, jealousy, and for Chanel, a new market in England for her growing fashion empire. But it would be her introduction and later close friendship with Winston Churchill that in all likelihood saved Chanel from a conviction for treason as a Nazi conspirator during the war. Personally, I'm not going to take fashion advice from someone who is a Nazi. A lot of times people don't really talk about that aspect of Coco Chanel because of how iconic she is. But why are we talking about simplicity? Why do we like simplicity? A lot of things I've been realizing recently have been born out of the simplicity movement and the minimalistic movement of the mid-2010s. Marie Kondo, as we all remember very clearly, maybe it's just me, but I'm going to say everybody, created the idea of sparking joy. Her spark joy rule forces you to think hard and be confused about the meaning of these things in your life. Does this dress actually make you look pretty? Or are you holding on to it because you really liked what you looked like in 8th grade? There's a lot of different things that come into us keeping clothing. In a TED Talk entitled, Why Are We So Attached to Our Things?, Kristen Jarrett makes us sit down and think about the value of the things that we own. The things that we own let us think about ourselves, reminisce on the past, attach certain memories to them. Our high school yearbooks aren't just pictures of our friends, they also contain back pages filled with signings, poor drawings of boobs, phone numbers, and inside jokes that you've probably forgotten since you've been in high school. Family heirlooms and celebrity paraphernalia lead us to connect with our family or those celebrities in ways that we wouldn't be able to with memory alone. Having a ring from your grandmother will often make you think of her, and having a Marilyn Monroe poster, well, you'd better hope that she's looking over you when you're getting ready for a night out. These capitalistic attachments to things and status lead us to become hoarders by nature. Why would we throw something away? It's worth $500. I paid $100 for this dress. I have to make good use of it. In his TED Talk, Why Are We So Attached to Our Things?, Kristen Jarrett says, envision, for instance, a dress hanging in your closet. Then imagine that you come across an identical dress in the window of a boutique. The two dresses look exactly the same, but you identify with the dress you have at home. To study this relationship, scientists review the brain activity of people looking at two baskets, one labeled mine and the other Alex's. What they found was that the region that comes to life when we think about ourselves also ignites when confronted with things we own. Machine resonance imaging might have supplied scientific proof, but that conclusion is intuitive and even ancient. More than 2,000 years ago, in the Nicomachean, how do you say that? Nicomachean ethics, Aristotle wrote, "What belongs to us and what we give away always seems very precious to us." This brings up the idea of enclothed cognition, or, oh wait, hold on, no, that's not true. We identify more with things that we own. We love it when we can buy a pair of shoes instead of renting a dress for a night. It gives us this value and this sense of ownership that we wouldn't have been able to have with just the dress alone.
What is like your most prized possession in your closet?
That's really hard to say because I'm not gonna lie, I have multiple. I'd say like the things in my closet that I stole from my parents' closets. And then I don't wear it much, but there's like this Vivienne Westwood like denim blazer that I have, and that's very, because one, like that one has higher material value, but that's also like the first time I ever treated myself to something like kind of higher material value with money that I earned myself. Also this other like kind of button-up shirt that I got from the shop in Japan. Yeah.
Recently, I think that this pair of pants that I've made, I'm wearing them right now, a serious improvement to my life to now have. I've been wearing these pants basically every day since. About as perfect as an item of clothing has gotten. So I have like a buckle back. I love buckle back pants. The yoke in the back of the jeans, I cut them on the fold, so it's one continuous piece instead of having a seam in the middle. There's like a coin pocket, obviously, but I got to style it after like there's like a little, I don't know, you've seen like on the traditional like bomber jackets, they have a little sleeve pocket, like a little bit of articulation on the knee, so it like stacks nicely. You make your own clothes and you just get to go like all the little details, all the little stuff that you like to have, you can have it all.
Another attachment to clothing is called enclothed cognition, or this belief that the clothes have some kind of value or make you better in the eyes of society. For example, if you see someone wearing a lab coat, you're more likely to believe that they're a doctor. They could just be Dr. Doofenshmirtz. This absolutely shows off the symbolic and psychological meaning of clothes. We immediately associate certain things with certain groups of people, like how I always am going to, I touched the microphone. We're always going to associate certain things with certain groups of people. I remember in 2020, everyone was talking about how cuffed jeans made you bisexual. A lot of my friends joke about how every gay person owns a pair of Doc Martens. A lot of goth chicks wear demonias, and slackers in high school were often caught wearing Vans slip-ons. That doesn't mean that all of these people wear these things exactly all the time, or that you have to wear these things to be this kind of person. But culturally, we've kind of created this understanding that the clothes that we own, the shoes that we wear, everything we put on ourselves visually represents who we are to everybody around us. Even putting on a new dress changes the way you see yourself. Clothes have intense power, and losing these clothes gives you a reaction of losing some kind of power. I personally have been attached to so many of my clothes. When looking through old photos of my house, and of old things I had in high school, things I'd worn for years, I teared up immediately. I remember spending $60 on a dress that made me look like Fran Drescher. And I miss it. It's not going to fit me anymore. That dress barely ever fit me. But it means something so deep to me because it was the first thing I haggled for, dress-wise, at the flea market. It's kind of sad having to deal with this part of my memories that have been completely gone because I don't have these clothes anymore. It sounds kind of stupid. It sounds like all of my memories are attached to material objects, which isn't true, but it really does make me stop and reflect and think about why these things matter to me. They are just things. That was the initial reaction that my whole family had when our house burned down. This is all just things. It's all replaceable. But psychology suggests that these memories will be rendered inaccessible because we no longer own these items.
Do you remember like what clothes you grabbed when you guys had to evacuate?
It was really fun. I was on FaceTime with my friend when we got put on mandatory evac, and he's from Boston too. So bro was like, huh? But we didn't have to evacuate until I think it was like the 10th, like 2 days, 3 days into the fire. But because I was in the Palisades when the fire had started and, kind of like firsthand saw how quickly it was moving. And then also like with the Santa Ana winds, like when I got home that day, I was like, I know that we're still like pretty far out of the way. Maybe pack a little something just in case, or like get shit like ready to pack, because this is kind of ridiculous. This is insane. We like packed some things, but like for me, the first thing I reached for were family photo albums and my journals. For the clothes, I went for like the sentimental things, like the things that were my parents'. There's also like in my room, there's a little like Ziploc bag with clothes from when I was a baby, like my clothes from when I was a baby. So that went in there, and sweatpants and like 2 changes of like casual clothes, like 1 or 2 changes.
When doing research for this video, I came across a website called Threading Change, written by Michaela Yanni. This is Love Letters to My Clothing. In the article, she states, emotional attachment to clothing is a mindfulness movement. It's about mindfulness when you consume, mindfulness when you wear, and mindfulness when your clothing is in need of a little extra care and repair. It's about recognizing that while there will always be new clothing to buy and wear, the stories and memories hidden within the seams of the items already in your closet are one of a kind. In her article, An Exploration into Our Emotional Attachment to Clothes, writer Katie Abson talks about how clothes have these encoded meanings, how ex's hoodies will always remind us of the times we were with this person. Memories are things that we need to preserve, and our clothes hold those memories. And clothing is also an extension of the self as an adult. Abson talks about it in this article as someone's personal brand. We always think about that one person who has a very distinct sense of style, like Aaliyah's interlude online with her Aaliyah core dressing. She looks incredible, and we know exactly the hallmarks of her style because it is so uniquely her. When we see one garter belt, one stocking, a couple of furry boots, a nice big hat, a statement t-shirt, and beautifully gradient lips, we're going to think of Aaliyah because that's what her style has been, at least online, for the past couple years. Not to say that nobody can wear those clothes except for her. I mean, people do all the time, and it looks really, really good, but we all know that that's Aaliyah core at the end of the day. These kinds of styles are what makes us who we are. Like for me, for example, I'm currently wearing a shirt that one of my best friends gave me. It was our friend Anna's shirt, given to my friend Clem, then given to me. And I have not given it back to anybody because I feel that it makes me more attached to my 2 friends. Abson argues that keeping clothes from old friends or lovers or relatives keeps us connected, and psychology actually backs this up. For a website called Fashion is Psychology, writer Palak Kher writes in The Psychology of Fashion Hoarders, clothes are like memory banks. They constitute a powerful tool that can trigger nostalgia, which in turn breeds happiness and lifts your mood. If a garment gives you the ability to harken back to the good old days, cherish it for a little while longer. This quote comes from Shakila Forbes Bell. Kher also mentions in their article that fear of missing out ends up driving a lot of young people's fashion choices. For example, feeling like we will not be able to connect with a certain group of people because we don't inherently look like them makes us feel a little out of place. Increased trend cycles only heighten this sense of missing out. If we're not all wearing the exact same baby tee from Shein that cost a child an arm and a leg and us $2, then why are we even consuming in the first place? We all know that fashion isn't inherently supposed to be a look like everybody else show. That's one of my favorite things about it, is that it celebrates the weird and the strange and the unusual.
What was your like favorite one of those looks that you worked on for that collection?
For that collection, I had a look which was based on fencing jackets, which hasn't changed a whole lot. Older ones were still the inspiration. So the sleeves were exaggerated, and generally the cut was a lot boxier. The pants maintained sort of a cropped look. The main way in which it was changed was messing with the surface of the finished garment. I just kicked it around in the dirt, dipped it in like puddles outside in the mud, and that created a very worn texture. The garment looked much, much older than it actually was. I mean, I wasn't doing anything super uniform to the garment. It was always just in spots. In particular, there was like one very, very dirty puddle outside of the building, like off the curb. And I think that's what gave like the most dominant stain. This is my personal favorite. I mean, it's work that happens around sharp tools. And so you poke yourself all the time, and sometimes you're going to bleed because of it.
Mm-hmm.
So there was one time where I was working with a razor blade because I think razor blades are a great tool for sewing. I'd cut like the center of my thumb open
Mm-hmm.
and I bled on the jacket.
Love that.
And I did that on purpose just to have that as an extra element.
And I also kind of love that it brings like the history of like the use of the garment too into that.
I didn't even think about that, but it definitely applies.
Right? It's cool. I love a little happy hour.
So can anyone ever really be on trend anymore? I'm gonna argue no. A lot of the issue that I've been having with clothes as of late, clothes aren't built to last anymore. They were. A lot of what we've been doing with these accelerating fashion cycles has been lowering the quality of our clothes, and therefore lowering the quality we feel about ourselves. You should put intentionality behind the things you buy, not to be on trend, but to be comfortable in what you're wearing. Most of my favorite clothes that I currently own have really large holes worn through them, mostly because I wear things a lot. My favorite shirt right now is a Garfield t-shirt one of my friends gave me for Christmas. It has a couple holes in the back, and I'm not getting rid of it. I need to learn how to patch those up. But again, as a college student in my senior year, second semester, a month away from graduating, I'm not really preoccupied with learning how to mend a garment right now. In an article for Fashion Journal, writer Zamira Whitehead, a phenomenon brought about by the work of psychologist Jean Piaget, the endowment effect, explains that we tend to attach a higher value to items we already own than other similar items we don't. It's closely tied to loss aversion, a universal bias that tells our brains that losing a beloved item is more painful than the joy of gaining a new one. Some studies have suggested that loss aversion has protected us throughout human evolution as it encourages us to minimize risk. It's like the old adage, a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. This was particularly important for human survival thousands of years ago, but in regards to my wardrobe, not so much.
What are some of the items that you've stolen from your parents?
I've stolen a lot of like silk slip type dresses from my mom. My favorites are she has like this long kind of like silvery blue one with like black lace trim. And then the other is a like dark brown one. That one's also Anna Sway. So I'm like,
No, literally. That's I love that.
and then from my dad, Von Dutch shirts.
Amazing. Would you say he was living that life?
Yeah.
Near the end of my interviews, I asked both Amelie and Dasha for their favorite item of clothing that they own. Obviously, it's a difficult question. What's your most prized possession? But both of them had really interesting answers. Neither of them talked about fast fashion in them either. I think we all know at the end of the day, fast fashion is a capitalistic solution to a problem that capitalism invented. There isn't really a purpose to have them other than to have cheap clothes made by cheap labor. It's not great clothes, they're not great fashion, but they're there and they're disposable. I think thinking of clothes as disposable has led us to this spot that we're in. If we can't appreciate the things that we own and we can't take care of them, then we're just not really going to feel anything at all towards them. I'd much rather be physically and spiritually attached to a lot of the stuff that I own and mourn the loss of it when I have to give them away than to not even really love them at all. It's a good thing, yeah. Is fashion destroying us, or I think it's just kind of capitalism. I don't think it's necessarily fashion. I think it's just capitalism. But yeah, maybe it isn't so disastrous. I really hope it's not, because I kind of enjoy it. Well, anyway, I really hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really hope you enjoy this. This is filmed on the day that I have to turn in my essay. I'm really good at not procrastinating, So if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more video essays, something that's similar in vein to this, hit that subscribe button, click that little bell over there, give it a little ding-a-lang, and then maybe I'll come up with something in the future. I'm trying to actually do this as like, a thing. Someone gets a journalism degree and they start making video essays. That's me. Anyway,